Hello, everyone. Welcome back to today's story. In this episode, we follow Jack as he desperately searches for Tu Tien and baby Anna, only to realize that this is no ordinary disappearance. What begins as a frantic journey through markets and streets quickly turns into a tense psychological battle when unseen forces start tearing down his flyers and strangers warn him to stop asking questions. As fear, guilt, and determination collide, Jack slowly uncovers the truth that someone powerful is trying to silence him. This story is about a man pushed to the edge, forced to choose between fear and fighting back. Stay with us until the end to feel the full weight of Jack's struggle. And don't forget to subscribe to help us reach 10,000 subscribers. Your support truly means the world to us. The morning feels unusually heavy as Jack stops in front of a small photocopy shop, squeezed between a phone repair stall and a shuttered clothing store. The fluorescent lights inside flicker faintly, humming like an insect trapped in a jar. He pauses before stepping in, catching his reflection in the glass. The man staring back at him looks older than he remembers. Eyes sunken, lips dry, shoulders bent forward as if carrying an invisible weight. It's only been a few days, but grief and fear have a way of compressing time, aging a person faster than years ever could. Jack grips his phone tightly. His thumb hovers over the screen before opening the photo again. Tu Tien is smiling, her head slightly tilted, baby Anna resting against her chest. Anna's tiny fingers curl into Tu Tien's shirt, her eyes wide and curious. It's a simple photo, taken on an ordinary day, back when ordinary still existed. Jack inhales slowly, then sends the image to the clerk via Zalo. "I need to print these," he says once he steps inside. His voice sounds strange to his own ears. Hoarse, uneven, like it might crack at any second. "My girlfriend and her baby. They've been missing." The clerk looks up, startled, then softens immediately. He asks questions gently, almost carefully, as if worried that the wrong word might break Jack apart. Paper size, color, or black and white? How many copies? Whether Jack wants any text added. Jack nods along, forcing his mind to stay focused. "Please add a line at the bottom," he says after a moment. "Looking for family. If you have any information, please contact this number." The word missing hangs in the air, unspoken but painfully clear. He orders 30 copies, no more, no less, and transfers the money without thinking. He hasn't carried cash since the day Tu Tien disappeared. It feels pointless now. When the clerk hands him the stack of flyers, still warm, the smell of fresh ink rising sharply, Jack presses them to his chest. For just a second, it feels like holding something solid in a world that's been falling apart. Outside, the sky is a flat, oppressive gray. Traffic roars past. Vendors shout prices. Laughter floats from somewhere nearby. But Jack feels disconnected from it all. The city keeps moving, uncaring, while his entire world has narrowed to two names, Tu Tien and Anna. He exhales slowly and starts walking. The first market he reaches is already crowded. Stalls overflow with vegetables, fruit, cheap clothes, plastic toys. Jack weaves through the narrow aisles, clutching the flyers so tightly his fingers ache. He stops in front of a woman arranging mangoes. "Ma'am, he says quietly, holding out the paper. "Have you seen this woman? She was with a baby." The woman studies the photo, then shakes her head with a small sigh. "No, I'm sorry." Jack thanks her and moves on. He asks again and again. His voice grows rougher with each repetition. Some people barely glance at the flyer before shaking their heads. Others look longer, sympathy flickering in their eyes. But sympathy doesn't bring answers. A few suggest other markets, other streets, other neighborhoods. Each suggestion gives him a brief spark of hope and another direction to exhaust himself chasing. He asks permission to tape flyers to walls and light poles. Every nod feels like a tiny victory. Each flyer he posts feels like sending a quiet plea into the world. Tu Tien's smile looks almost out of place against stained concrete and rusted metal, painfully alive. Jack lingers at each one for a moment, smoothing the edges, whispering, "Please." What he doesn't see is what happens after he walks away. In a narrow corner behind the stalls, a man in a dark jacket watches him. As soon as Jack disappears into the crowd, the man steps forward, tears down the flyer, and crumples it in his fist. "You won't get anywhere," he mutters. He snaps a quick photo of the torn paper, sends it to someone, then blends back into the crowd as if he was never there. Jack keeps searching, unaware. The afternoon heat presses down on him, sweat soaking through his shirt. His phone vibrates, and his heart jumps, only to sink when he sees it's just a bank notification. No missed calls, no messages, nothing. By midday, his legs ache and his head throbs, but he refuses to stop. He sinks into a plastic chair at a roadside tea stall. Dust swirling lazily in the air. An older man he knows pours him a glass of iced tea and sets it down gently. "You look exhausted," the man says. "Any news yet?" Jack shakes his head slowly. "I've been everywhere she used to go. Every place. It's like they vanished." The words crack something open inside him. He talks about the last time he saw Tu Tien, about how Anna laughed when he made silly faces, about the plans they had talked about late at night. He talks about the promises he made to protect them, to give Anna a better life. Now those promises feel painfully empty. His hands tighten around the glass until the cold numbs his fingers. The man listens without interrupting. "I'll ask around," he says finally. "I'll help however I can." It's a small comfort, but Jack clings to it. He finishes the tea, steadies himself, and stands. The fear creeps back almost immediately, heavier than before. In the afternoon, Jack heads to another market farther away. The streets here are quieter, older, the buildings worn down by time. He tapes flyers to cracked walls, bus stops, electric poles. Each movement is careful, deliberate, as if the act itself matters, as if doing this right might somehow change the outcome. Then suddenly, two men step into his path. "You're Jack," one of them says casually. Jack freezes. "Yes. Who are you?" The man smiles, but there's no warmth in it. "Just passing through. Thought we'd give you some advice. Stop asking about that woman. Stop putting these papers up." Jack's heart slams against his ribs. "Why?" "She's my girlfriend. That's her child." The second man steps closer, voice low. "Some people don't like attention, and if you keep this up, things could get unpleasant." Fear flashes through Jack, quickly followed by anger. His fists clench. Is this a threat? The first man shrugs. Think of it as a warning, for your own good. They step aside and disappear into the street, leaving Jack standing there, chest heaving. His mind races. Someone is watching him. Someone powerful enough to send people to scare him. A name rises uninvited in his thoughts. Mrs. Tu Tien's former mother-in-law. The woman who never accepted her. The woman who always looked at Anna like a mistake instead of a child. Jack closes his eyes briefly, forcing himself to breathe. If Mrs. Tui is involved, then this isn't just a disappearance. It's something far darker. And that realization sends a chill through him. As evening approaches, the sky darkens and the city's energy fades. Jack keeps walking, even as fear crawls up his spine. Every stranger feels suspicious now. Every shadow seems to follow him. Still, he doesn't stop. Because somewhere out there, Tu Tien and Anna are waiting. And no matter how desperate he feels, no matter how dangerous this search becomes, Jack knows one thing for certain. He will not stop looking. Night settles over the city like a heavy blanket, and Jack feels it press down on him the moment the sun disappears. The streets glow under yellow streetlights, but the warmth is an illusion. Everything feels colder now, more dangerous. He keeps walking anyway, shoulders tense, eyes constantly scanning reflections in shop windows and passing motorbikes. Every sound feels amplified. Footsteps behind him. A phone vibrating somewhere nearby. The sudden laughter of strangers that makes his heart jolt. Jack knows he should rest. His body is exhausted, his head pounding from dehydration and stress. But the thought of stopping, of going home to an empty room where Tu Tien's slippers still sit by the door, terrifies him more than the fatigue. As long as he's moving, as long as he's searching, he hasn't failed yet. He reaches another neighborhood, quieter, more residential. The houses here are packed tightly together, lights glowing faintly behind metal gates. Jack tapes a flyer to a utility pole, then another near a small grocery shop that's about to close. The shop owner eyes him curiously, but says nothing. Jack forces a polite smile and steps away. His phone rings. The sound is sharp in the silence, making his heart leap into his throat. For half a second, hope surges, raw and desperate. Maybe someone has seen them. Maybe this is the call he's been waiting for. He answers immediately. Hello? There's a pause on the other end. Then a man's voice, low and calm, almost bored. Jack, you really don't know when to stop, do you? Jack's grip tightens around the phone. Who is this? Another pause. A faint chuckle. You don't need to know that. What you need to know is this. Stop looking for Tu Tien and the child. Jack's pulse races. If you know where they are, tell me, please. The man ignores the plea. You're making things complicated, posting flyers, asking questions. That's not good. Are you working for Mrs. Tui? Jack blurts out. Silence stretches for a moment longer this time. Then the man speaks again, his tone colder. You should be grateful she's being patient. The line goes dead. Jack stands frozen, phone pressed to his ear, breathing hard. The confirmation hits him like a punch to the chest. It is her. All the unease, the threats, the torn flyers, they weren't random. Mrs. Tui is behind this, pulling strings from the shadows, trying to erase Tu Tien and Anna from his life. Anger flares, hot and uncontrollable. Jack slams his fist into the pole beside him, ignoring the sting in his knuckles. "You can't do this," he mutters. "You don't get to decide their lives." But anger alone won't bring them back. He forces himself to think. Mrs. Tui wants him scared, silent, isolated, and she's getting dangerously close to succeeding. The realization sends a wave of dread through him. If she's willing to threaten him openly now, what else is she capable of? Jack resumes walking, but his steps are slower, heavier. He keeps replaying the phone call in his head, analyzing every word. She's being patient. The implication is clear. Patience can run out. He reaches a small park and sinks onto a bench, rubbing his face with both hands. The city feels suddenly hostile, like it's closing in around him. He thinks about going to the police, but a familiar fear stops him. Without evidence, without proof, what can he say? That a powerful woman might be behind his girlfriend's disappearance? That strangers told him to stop asking questions? It sounds flimsy, almost paranoid, and that's exactly how Mrs. Tui wants it. Jack pulls out his phone and scrolls through his contacts, hesitating before stopping at a name. Someone he hasn't spoken to in a long time. Someone who once warned him that Mrs. Tui never does anything without a reason. He exhales and makes the call. The conversation is short but intense. Jack explains everything: the disappearance, the flyers, the threats, the phone call. The person on the other end listens quietly, then says, "If it's her, you need to be careful. She doesn't play fair." "I don't care," Jack replies. "I just want them back." "I'll see what I can find out," the voice says. "But Jack, don't do this alone." After the call ends, Jack sits in silence, staring at the dark playground in front of him. Swings creak softly in the wind, empty and unsettling. He imagines Anna there, laughing, Tu Tien, pushing her gently. The image twists painfully in his chest. He stands up abruptly. Sitting still is unbearable. On his way back through the streets, Jack notices something that makes his stomach drop. A flyer, one of his flyers, taped crookedly to a wall. Relief flickers. Maybe not all of them were destroyed. He steps closer, then stops. Someone has scribbled across Tu Tien's face with a black marker. Thick lines slash through her eyes, her smile defaced beyond recognition. At the bottom, written in messy handwriting, are two words: "Stop searching." Jack's breath catches. His hands tremble as he reaches out, tearing the flyer down. Rage, fear, and helplessness crash over him all at once. This isn't just intimidation anymore. It's cruelty, psychological warfare. A nearby door creaks open, and an elderly woman peers out. She looks at Jack, then at the torn paper in his hand. "Son," she says softly, "you should be careful. Some people around here, they've been asking about you." Jack's heart sinks. "Asking what?" The woman hesitates. "Where you go? Who you talk to?" Jack nods, forcing a thank you past the tightness in his throat. As he walks away, the sense of being watched intensifies. Every shadow feels alive now. Every parked motorbike a potential threat. When he finally reaches home, it feels wrong to unlock the door. The silence inside is suffocating. Tu Tien's mug is still on the counter. Anna's blanket lies folded on the couch, exactly where Jack left it. He sinks onto the floor, back against the wall, clutching the defaced flyer. For the first time since the search began, tears spill over. He doesn't sob loudly. He just sits there, shoulders shaking, grief pouring out in quiet waves. He whispers apologies into the empty room for not protecting them, for not being strong enough, for not knowing where they are. But as the night deepens, something shifts. Fear has followed him all day, shadowed every step. But beneath it, something else begins to grow. Resolve. Mrs. Tui wants him silent, broken, gone. Jack wipes his face and stands up. If this is a battle, then running won't save Tu Tien and Anna. Playing by Mrs. Tui's rules won't either. He knows now that the search can't stay public. Flyers and markets only make him an easy target. From this moment on, he needs to be smarter.